Welcome to the Experts in Sport podcast, brought to you by Loughborough University. This podcast seeks to bring together the worlds of academia and professional practice. If you're interested in the latest research and trends in sport, then this is the podcast for you. Today I'm with Nik Diaper and Penny Briscoe. Nik Diaper is currently the head of parasports at Loughborough University. He has worked in elite Paralympic sport for 18 years and has attended 6 Paralympic Games. Nik was previously the head of sports science and sports medicine for Paralympic sports at the English Institute of Sport, and more recently was the head of performance for the British Paralympic Association before joining Loughborough in June 2019. Penny Briscoe is an alumni of Loughborough University. She has over 30 years' experience in elite sport as an athlete, coach, manager and director. Penny started in elite sports as an athlete in canoeing, where she competed in the 1996 Olympic Games in Atlanta. She moved into a coaching career before joining the British Paralympic Association in 2001, where she's now the Director of Sport. Penny also works with the wider Paralympics team and is the chef de mission for ParalympicsGB. In today's podcast, we talk to Penny and Nik about creating an optimum performance environment for ParalympicsGB. It's an exciting time for parasport at Loughborough, with the launch of the Loughborough University Parasport Strategy in December 2019. And this is the first Experts in Sport podcast with a focus on parasport. This year's Paralympic Games was obviously postponed due to COVID-19, and although preparation will certainly involve planning for all eventualities with COVID-19, today we focus on the wider aspects of preparing an optimum performance environment. With about a year to go until the planned start of the Paralympic Games on August the 24th, 2021, we wanted to give you a broad overview. As we get closer to the Games, we'll be talking to various experts in physiology and psychology about their specific roles. But to get us started, we're going to hear from Penny and Nik on the role they've played in the development of parasport, how the area has grown and inspired the nation, and what they're doing to ensure ParalympicsGB are the best prepared team at the Games. Hi Penny, hi Nik, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Morning.
Hi Martin.
Hello. We're here today to talk about creating an optimum performance environment for ParalympicsGB. So can we just get started with, Penny, how do you prepare to start creating that optimum environment?
Great question. Well, obviously, as you know, my role is Director of Sport at ParalympicsGB, but I'm also chef de mission for the team. So I lead the team into the Summer Games, obviously the next Games being in Tokyo. And our role as a National Paralympic Committee is to take the team to the Games. We're mandated by the International Paralympic Committee to do that. But our ambition is much greater than that. We're a world-leading, potentially the world-leading National Paralympic Committee. And so as soon as the host city is announced, we look to get out on the ground into environment as soon as possible. And that's usually 5 to 6 years ahead of the next but one Paralympic Games. And it's really important to do that to ensure that we're able, I guess, to, it's not as much as putting our towel down, but it's almost getting in early to create those critical relationships, not only with the host organisers, but also with key suppliers, and also developing the understanding of the environment. And that takes a huge amount of time. As Nik will know, and Nik's been through this process a number of times with me and the chef de mission team, we need to understand the physical environment, the operational environment, and also the political environment, if we're able then to put the plans in place that can give us a performance edge when it comes to the Games.
Yeah, and if I can just come in on that one, I think, Penny's alluded to some of the kind of operational challenges or the importance of building and fostering relationships in environment. And I guess the other key considerations there, which is typically where I've come in to support in the past and certainly for Tokyo in a previous role with BPA was how our understanding of the environment from a performance point of view and what the risks to performance or health and well-being might be, because sometimes those risks can be converted into opportunities. But if we take Tokyo as an example, just briefly without going into too much detail just yet, we know, and it's been well documented, but we were aware of this as soon as the bid was announced, of potentially one of the most challenging environments that a Games has ever been held, Olympics or Paralympics, given the environmental heat and humidity humidity. Temperatures mid-30s and 80 to 90% humidity is pretty oppressive. And you add to that a 12-hour flight and an 8-hour time zone shift to the east. Put all those things together, you have what could potentially be termed a pretty hostile environment, particularly if plans and procedures haven't been made to prepare the team for that. So I guess from my point of view, the best prepared team is the team that is best prepared to compete in those particular conditions. And that just takes so much coordination and planning and discussion with the individual sports in that whole 6-year period leading up to the games.
Yeah, you're right there, Nik. I think obviously our strategy is to take a best prepared team to the games, and that strategy does start 5 or 6 years out from the games, and how we work with the individual sports. And there's obviously a variety of sports, team sports, individual sports, indoor sports, outdoor sports. How do we work with the individual team leaders and significantly the heads of performance support to ensure that not only we as the core team understand the environment, but each team leader and their support teams understand the environment, so they're best able to prepare their athletes. And I think from our perspective, what we then, if the sport-specific teams are the technical experts, then the BPA team is the games environment experts, and we work collaboratively to ensure that, one, we're games ready, which is that best prepared strategy that Nik talks about, but also then what we create in environment is a safe and supportive team environment that allows every team member to thrive and to deliver their personal bests when it matters most. And that's whether you're an athlete or staff member. So that's our ambition. And that's a pretty complex task when you think about in potentially over 250 athletes, a total delegation in village of over 500. How do you ensure that every athlete, every staff member can deliver those personal bests when it matters most, when you've got potential conflict in or very different needs and conflict in schedules?
And just building on the needs that Penny mentioned there, I mean, I guess it's obvious, but we are dealing with a special population here in terms of athletes with a disability, and in some cases, probably our biggest conundrums are with how we create the optimum environment based on whether it be physical accessibility of a holding or a preparation camp or the games infrastructure, but then also more nuanced things around, we know, for an example, athletes with spinal cord injury or individuals with spinal cord injury don't have the ability to thermoregulate. So when we're going to that type of environment, all those disability or para-specific elements, some operational, some very technical, physiological, or even psychological, start to come into play.
And I think, Nik, you've touched on it there, that the environment is quite complex. And I think when we talk about the games environment, we don't just talk about the village. We talk about the various different environments that we actually deliver. Our games delivery is based around. So there's obviously a team that is based in the UK, and they are critical in terms of being the backstop and also obviously working more locally in the UK. We've got our prep camp, which is that immediate pre-games period that sports will use in different ways. Some sports like athletics will go in there and do final prep. Some sports will use it as an R&R, so rest and recovery. We've got a 12-hour flight, but the reality for athletes and staff members is they're probably travelling for close to 24 hours. And we know that travel fatigue is a significant potential risk for both athletes and staff for being best prepared at the games. And then we have in and out of village operations that are very team focused. And then in terms of the wider delegation, we also have our sort of guest program, which is really important in terms of the commercial partners that have worked with us for this cycle and our contractual obligations, but also really critically is the friends and family support that we provide. So it is a complex environment when you take the different stakeholders and their individual needs. And the fact is that we one of our ambitions is not only to create an optimal environment, but it's also to quality assure the experience that anyone in the delegation has being part of Paralympics GB, irrespective of location and irrespective of their role.
It sounds like obviously a huge task that you've just spelt out there for everybody. Can we have a look at a little bit more specifically and provide some examples? Now, obviously not wanting to give the game away and give away any trade secrets, but if we have a look through the environment and then potentially logistics and then potentially challenges, would you be able to give us some examples? So any examples of adaptations or changes that you are making specifically because of the environment in Tokyo?
I think from my side, a key one will be, it's not a secret. Everyone knows, the potential for Tokyo to be one of the most hostile environments just from an environmental temperature, heat and humidity perspective. So I think, Penny said at the intro that, Paralympics GB or GB as a nation is probably considered world leading in many fronts when it comes to para sport, not just our performances at the games, given the relatively small size of our country. But I think when you look at, let's not forget this, we are where the Paralympic Games was born. So we've got a long heritage and a proud history there. And I think that stems as well into how lucky we are and how fortunate we are, thanks to be honest, to investment and really good, passionate people along the way, to have practitioners in the UK that are, I think world leading in their field when it comes to sports science and sports medicine. Without giving the game away, even though I think, probably everyone knows as much as everyone else, it's fair to say that heat preparation and humidity preparation has been probably one of the most important factors over the last 4 years for preparing not just athletes, Penny mentioned this before as well, but also the importance of staff for that environment. And of course, there's so many different ways you could go about doing that. But I think, Loughborough leads the way here in terms of previous PhD that was completed recently by Ben Stevenson and some of the work he's done working with the English Institute of Sport and with, individual sports. And I think it's really important to remember that, there are the obvious sports that will be affected by heat and humidity, your endurance, your linear high energetic sports. But I think when we look at parasport in particular, there are probably some sports that on paper are not obvious risks to performance in terms of, or health in terms of heat and humidity. But because of the nature of the impairment or long exposure to high humidity and high temperature, take something like archery as an example, you probably do have some specific interventions that are required in those spaces. And that's where I genuinely think that, the British team and Paralympics GB in particular will be, I can say that with confidence, one of the best prepared teams, if not the best prepared team for Tokyo when it comes to the environmental challenges.
And I would agree with you there, Nick. And I think the evidence that we've captured from the test events leading up to Tokyo, obviously we've now got the delay in the rescheduling. The feedback from the sports that were involved said that they felt that the preparation was exceptional. Clearly, lessons will have been learned from the test events themselves, but the work around heat and humidity really put them in a good place to actually maximise the opportunity that a test event provides. I think the other stuff in terms of the environment, the operational environment, if you like, is that we focus on three areas, really. We've already talked about it being safe and supportive, and obviously athlete health and welfare and staff health and welfare is really, really important. But the conundrum is we're bringing 500 or so people together in, we'll take a whole accommodation block, if you can imagine it, an apartment block, if you like, that's split into smaller apartments. And then we have a number of services. So we have our team support base, which is, basically we want to create a home from home. We don't want athletes to be complacent, but we want it to be a comfortable experience. We then have our performance centre, which is, I think, probably our secret weapon. And we can talk a little bit about, I think, the success that we created in Rio through the work of the practitioners in the performance hub. And then we also have our media hub. And I think that from our perspective, once every 4 years, for both summer and winter, we have the medium of the Paralympic Games to actually promote individuals, sports and the team. It's, I think, the fourth biggest sporting event globally, and it's probably the spotlight moment for para athletes. And we only have to look back to Athens and Beijing, which Athens in 2004 was my first Paralympics, and Nik was involved back then as well with wheelchair tennis. There was very little interest in para sport, but obviously our home games has changed, a seminal moment, and has changed the landscape forever in terms of global interest in para sport, and the realization of just how rich the environment is. And we've got a nation of para sport fans, and we've got national and global heroes within our team, and so there are different components in terms of the dynamics of the environment, and it's ensuring that we get the balance right. So certainly with media, it's about maximizing the profile and the opportunity to show just how inspirational para athletes are, and to inspire that next generation, but at the same time not impacting on the performance of the athletes through distraction. So as they say, timing is everything, but we have to use that moment to promote the sport, promote the individuals, and promote the team.
Penny, you mentioned their growth and inspiring the nation. So what kind of growth have you seen since the origins, or since 2012, let's say? What's the growth in interest? And have you seen that play out in participation for para-athletes or potential future para-athletes?
Yeah, I think we had a twin track ambition going into London as a Paralympics GB, and that was success on the field of play, but also to inspire change off the field of play. And obviously our mission and our vision are still very closely aligned to that, in terms of we want to, through sport, inspire a better world for disabled people. And we do that through the excellence of the athletes on the field of play, but also them as ambassadors, both on and off the field of play. I think the things that we noticed post London is that there was an upsurge in interest in para sport. I think sports like wheelchair basketball, para rowing, there was definitely an uplift in membership numbers that were interested in para sport. And I think that the stats and the polls do show that the level of inspiration that was provided, and I guess that change in perceptions. But it's a work in progress. We know there is much that still needs to be done, and as I've already alluded to, that how we positively promote parasport is an integral part of us being a best prepared team, because if we miss the moment, then we're waiting largely another 4 years to have that moment again. And the Games is a unique environment. It's a fusion of sights and sounds, and I remember being in the Rio Stadium and with Nik, and there was just huge roars from the right, and we assumed it was for a Brazilian athlete, but actually it was 3 Indian high jumpers that were enthralling the crowd through their just pure brilliance as para athletes. It's quite an incredible environment to be involved in, and my previous life was Olympic canoeing. And I think when I arrived in parasport in 2001, it was a different world, and we had great athletes. We had some really good technical staff, but we were sort of coming through from a care culture into a more elite, high performance environment. And Nik can talk a little bit about the experiences that he's had in terms of coming through an institute system where there were very few para-focused practitioners to now, as he's already alluded to, that we were probably world leading in terms of the breadth and depth of para-specific practitioners, and that's made a huge difference in terms of the quality of preparation and ultimately the performance impact that's had.
Yeah, I think if I can come in there, Penny, you're absolutely right. London was transformational, I think, at a global level in terms of parasport, but particularly in the UK. And it's really hard to capture in any kind of survey or objectively what the legacy of the games was, because I think it means so many different things to so many different people or functions. But if I take the perspective of the high performance system, and in particular the delivery of sports science and sports medicine services, through institutes, not just the English Institute, but Scottish, Welsh and Northern Ireland. If you look at the amazing opportunities that practitioners now have to be specialists in parasport, myself included, like I think I'm consider myself incredibly lucky to have had a really long and rich career in para-specific roles. That was definitely not the case pre-London. I think the moment London won the bid to host the Paralympic Games, I think it transform the landscape as far as the high performance system is in the UK. And if you look around now, whether you're a physiologist, a nutritionist, a data scientist, a talent pathway scientist, a psychologist, the opportunities that now exist as a result of the momentum and the interest that was generated from there. And to be fair, the funding that we continue to be grateful to benefit from, that has had a massive effect on job opportunities and special interest for those of us who have the passion to work in parasport.
It has been amazing, actually. You have seen a huge change in able-bodied perceptions toward parasport as well. And hopefully that, from what you're saying, has had a huge impact on participation and the size of the industry, which hopefully will continue.
And I think another thing to add, if we just step out from sport for a moment, probably my role at Loughborough is a good example of something that has come off the back of ultimately the success that London had. Would Loughborough Uni have appointed a head of parasport had we not had that seminal moment in London? Maybe, but my guess would be possibly not. And I think that's quite telling that a university of our reputation has gone through this bold, brave parasport strategy, which, to the best of our knowledge, I don't think any other university in the world is doing, and hopefully we're setting the benchmark. But I think in this day and age, and our world has changed so much just in the last 6 months through a variety of issues, not just COVID. But if you look at the global trend towards embracing diversity and inclusion and celebrating that actively, not just passively. You look at all the big global brands like Nike, clothing manufacturers, big companies, you're starting to see a very, very real shift in their attitude and their approach towards embracing the 1 billion disabled people that exist in the world today. I think that's something definitely I've sensed is a global trend towards being more embracing of diversity. Still huge room to go, clearly. But I think, to Penny's point earlier, the Paralympic Games has helped that because it provides that incredible platform once every 4 years, both summer and winter, to showcase diversity, inclusion, the brilliance of the human body and spirit. And I think that's what the Paralympic movement represents for me.
It must be amazing working in it for you guys, because I can just sense the passion and the excitement in your guys' voices for that change that we've all seen, particularly since London in inclusivity. And I think it's testament to you guys, the work that you've done, and and the country as a whole to make this happen. It really has been amazing. It's just so good to hear and see your voices being so animated.
I think with that, Martin, comes the challenge as well, though, because obviously performance standards are rising year on year, and obviously, which is a brilliant challenge to have. How do we stay as that world leading nation? And I think partnerships and I guess performance innovation is where it's at for us. So if we look back to Rio and the performance centre that we created, it was only 2 cycles previous that in Beijing and in Athens that we were, it was very Heath Robinson. You'd have a few practitioners working out of bedrooms. It wasn't that professional, multidisciplinary. It was the start of that. But where we've shifted our multidisciplinary performance centre to is it's light and dark, over multiple game cycles, and we were able to leverage a home performance advantage in London and create a bespoke performance centre that was led by colleagues at Team GB. But the feedback from London was that this was an essential for future games, that we needed to create this multidisciplinary hub with world-leading specialists in all of the ologies and all of the disciplines. And Rio was a really challenging environment, as I'm sure that you know, that we faced an organising committee and city that was basically bankrupt through the Olympics, and there was threat over whether the Paralympics would happen, what cuts would have to be made. And we arrived in Rio, and we had one immediate challenge, which was, let's make this building shine, let's make the athletes feel just so incredibly special when they arrive here. And that was against a backdrop. There was no security, there were no cleaners, there were huge challenges, and we just took the initiative, which I think is we prosper in poor circumstances, if you like, because we've got great experience, we've got good resource, and we make things happen. And part of that you've alluded to, there's huge passion, but there's just huge drive and determination and professionalism as well. And what Nik and Georgina Sharples and Dr. Stuart Miller and others did was quite frankly remarkable in terms of bringing together the world leading and the UK's leading practitioners and creating basically, it looked like a professional medical centre that you could have seen in EIS in Loughborough, just transported over into Rio. And the breadth of services, Nik, and the breadth of usage was incredible, wasn't it? But it was also doing the basics right. So health and well-being paramount. And, Nik and others would have a job in the morning of just a 20-storey building of wiping down every single handrail, every single door handle, every single button on the lift, just to ensure that we were doing the basics really well. And then, Nik, I think that some of the work, the multidisciplinary, the collaborative work between the sports and obviously the core team ensured that athletes that were facing physical challenges actually not only got onto the start line, but actually won medals. It was quite phenomenal.
Yeah, I think we spoke about this evolution that's happened and the increasing sophistication of how well the sports and the world-class programs prepare their athletes for games, which again looks so different to what it was back in the days that Athens, that Penny alluded to in Athens earlier. But obviously with that comes the challenge of how we meet the demands of the sports that make up Paralympics GB, because they have very sophisticated support teams. And the challenge of a Paralympic Games, unlike a World Championships or a World Cup event, is there are restrictions that are imposed on all of us around accreditation and who can go. So the challenge for both Paralympic, for BPA core team and for the individual sports is having to deliver what they would normally deliver without necessarily having all the people or the accreditations that they would have at a World Championships. And that creates an interesting conundrum and dilemma. And inevitably, it probably means that most sports don't have access to their full complement. So it's really about working in partnership, understanding their needs, creating an environment for them. The performance center Penny described, we didn't create for BPA or for the core team. That's created for the sports based on what they wanted, what they needed. And our role really is to facilitate that environment. And I vividly remember a moment in Rio in the performance center that Penny was describing, when I just took a moment to step away from the hustle and bustle of a typical village day. And it was an incredible moment when you just looked at the expertise that we had within that building, obviously in terms of members of the British delegation, not just from the BPA core team, which consists of doctors, physios, nurses, and massage therapists, but obviously the really important experts that each individual sport has, whether they be through the EIS or employed by the NGB. And the bit that was really nice for me was just looking at, it didn't matter what T-shirt people were wearing. Obviously, in that case, they were all wearing Paralympics GB kit, but you knew some were either EIS practitioners or from other home nations or NGB employed practitioners, it really didn't matter. What you had was just an incredible level of expertise. And the most important thing here, working genuinely together. This wasn't siloed working. This was practitioners from different sports coming together, sharing ideas in the heat of the moment, helping each other out, both technically and emotionally, and the other side of the games, which is a tough environment to operate in. And that for me really kind of shone through, because it just showed, I think, how lucky we are to have the people we do in the British system, and just how good they are. And it's not about necessarily bricks and mortar and fancy equipment. It's about just really, really good people.
Yeah, good people and the quality of the partnerships, Nik, because I think individuals in isolation couldn't deliver what we delivered as a team. And obviously with backing from UK Sport, the Peter Harrison Foundation were very much a part of supporting that performance, creating that performance environment. But it was I think that it's really important to note that we're a very values-driven organisation and a values-driven team. And we talk about excellence, but we also talk about openness and honesty and trust and respect, and that was palpable. You could feel the respect, you could feel the trust, and in terms of the mission, that we were all working towards the same direction, which was to create this safe and supportive environment. Welfare and well-being absolutely critical, as well as obviously that desire to deliver those personal best performances and to finish as high on the medal table as we possibly can. But we talk constantly about the how of our what, and doing things in the right way is I think something that characterises every member of the Paralympics GB team, and I think that is something that will stay with us and is the foundation in terms of our work towards Tokyo.
Penny, I think that's a brilliant place to leave it with the podcast. I mean, you've talked about trust and teams working together. It sounds like you've got amazing teams who are passionate as you guys, who are producing, unbelievable athletes, and everybody's singing off the same song sheet, working towards kind of one vision, one goal. As we move forward, I think, Nik, we're going to get together again and we're going to speak to the ologists, as Penny so gracefully put it. We'll speak to all of those and have a look at more detail of the physiology and the psychology, potentially the nutrition, and we'll put some further podcasts out there to kind of look at the scope of this. But I really, really appreciate your time talking about this. And I just think, Penny, the passion that's coming from you and Nik is unbelievable. If that sounds like it's filtered into your team and into your athletes, I'm sure that this success is just going to keep going and going. So thanks very much for your time. I look forward to seeing the results and speaking to you again on the journey to Tokyo.
Thanks, Martin. I think every day I feel honoured to have the role that I have, and I'm a few layers removed from the athletes these days, but performance through and through, and everything that we do is about taking that best prepared team to the games, but doing the right things at the right time and definitely doing them in the right way.
Some great insights from Nik and Penny into creating an optimum performance environment for Paralympics GB. As we get closer to the Paralympic Games, we'll be speaking more to practitioners and hearing about the role they play. If you enjoyed this podcast and are interested in hearing more from experts in sport, then you can subscribe via iTunes, Spotify and other major podcast outlets. Bye for now. See you next time.